How's it going, friends? And welcome to episode 8 of the Cynical Den Podcast. Every week I spend far too much time trying to plan a witty opening monologue for the show, try and start off strong and all that. This week, due to a lack of ideas, I debated starting the show by saying, "What's the deal, YouTube? It's your boy Fringy." I'm just kidding, obviously. I'm not that much of a talentless twat. I figured it would be best to start off the show by talking about Star Wars. That seems fairly relevant at the moment. We now know what the name of the next movie is going to be, The Last Jedi. Doesn't seem entirely accurate, but I forgot the extended universe doesn't matter anymore. This probably doesn't come as a surprise to any of you, but I like Star Wars. I've always liked Star Wars, and yes, that includes the prequels. I'm personally of the mind that while somewhat poorly executed, there were a lot of good ideas in the prequels. I'm not counting midichlorians, by the way, one of the worst changes to ever be made to Star Wars. But they did do a great deal to expand the Star Wars mythos on the big screen. Even if it did, create an inconsistency to where 30 years prior to the original trilogy somehow looks a lot more futuristic. And it seems like there's a regress in terms of the technology. They probably could have done a better job to not make it look so clean, I guess. That was one of the big issues with the prequels in terms of the visuals. But even then, you look at that movie, you look at some of those movies and remember that they were made, the most recent one, Revenge of the Sith, was 2005. So even go back as far as 1999, I mean, even though they have aged a bit poorly, they still look fairly good considering how old these movies are starting to get. They don't really have the timeless feel of the original trilogy, which, while it did have some wonky visual effects, it's aged pretty well, mostly because they used a lot of practical effects and practical assets, which means that it actually looks real because the things that they were using special effects on were basically real things, as opposed to entirely CG clones. Why would they do that? Why would it not just be easier to hire some extras and get them into the clone armor and start just shooting it? I can understand doing CG for the battle droids and all that, but clones are still people, so it would make sense to just hire some extras. I'm not asking for you to get 10,000 extras for the final shot when Begun the Clone Wars has. I'm just saying, it might have been a good idea to not entirely rely on CGI. Man, it's funny, I start off by saying, yeah, I like the movies, but then I spend the last minute talking about all their problems, and that's not even getting into the writing. However, when it comes to the prequels for me, I feel that taken together, they come together largely due to the merits of Revenge of the Sith, which is by far the best out of those three. And it is one of my favorites in the series. I mean, it doesn't beat the original trilogy, but I do like Revenge of the Sith more than The Force Awakens, because it had a lot of emotionally riveting scenes. And yeah, part of that is because they had 2 movies to set it up. But it just had a lot of impact. It wasn't that it was grim dark that made it a good movie. It had that kind of impact because we all kind of knew what we were heading towards. And much like The Empire Strikes Back, it's a bittersweet ending. I mean, except it's actually a lot worse because the heroes lose, but there's the hope with the ending shot where Luke's being delivered to Tatooine. And that was a great way to end that. I mean, when people just say, no, these movies are meritless, it's like, now you're talking bullshit. There are so many memorable shots in these movies and memorable scenes. Even in Attack of the Clones, the worst Star Wars movie, there are still good moments in that. And the soundtrack was fantastic in the prequels. I mean, it was excellent, those songs. You compare it to what there was in The Force Awakens, I can't remember any of the songs. I mean, it was good, because John Williams is one of the best composers of all time, one of my personal favorites. The music was still good, but there was a lot more impact for a lot of the scores in the prequels in much the same way as the original trilogy. So when it comes to the prequels, I don't like them more than the original trilogy. Of course I don't, because they had a lot of problems for sure. And the original trilogy was a very focused story that had a strong beginning, middle, and end, likable characters. And while there were some instances of cheesy dialogue, and that's kind of to be expected because Star Wars is a space opera, don't trick yourselves, guys. Like, Star Wars is meant to be cheesy, even when we have this material that gets darker and and a little more complex. The original trilogy sort of had a sense of it had a sense of passion to it that I really like, because if you're familiar with what was happening behind the scenes on the original film, at least, George Lucas wasn't even sure that the film was going to succeed. It was basically him going out on a limb, and then it ended up being one of the most successful films of all time. However, despite spending the last 5 minutes talking about this isn't what I was going to talk about. I was actually planning to talk about my hypothetical Star Wars movies. Now, under Disney, the Star Wars expanded universe is no longer canon, which I really don't like. And for a property as big as Star Wars to have only movies and 2 TV shows as canon is very odd. You don't really see that kind of thing in other comparable universes like The Lord of the Rings or even, Halo, for example. It also negated a lot of things that fans did like, which certainly is going to alienate people. It's why, if you're in charge of a widely beloved series, it's a good idea not to retcon everything. People will appreciate it if you try to work the stories into the existing universe. And I know this sounds like it contradicts what I was talking about the other day, the other episode about sequels, but when it comes to a sequel, if you're actually putting effort into it, then that's better than just saying it doesn't count anymore. All of that is non-canon. We're just starting over again. Just take the bad stuff and roll with it. Since Disney are clearly going to be utilizing the Star Wars brand for years to come, I thought it would be fun to list my hypothetical Star Wars movies. I don't expect them to stop making Star Wars movies in 2020 or whatever, because that's as far as the plan goes. Obviously, if it was still George Lucas, it wouldn't be happening, probably. But if it was going to happen, it would just be the saga movies, and then not again for another 15 or 20 years, maybe. Or maybe it would be the end, but we know it's not going to be the end. When Episode 9 comes out, that's not going to be the end. You don't spend $5 billion on an acquisition that you're only going to use for 5 years. I'm mostly going to be listing my hypothetical anthology films, but I do have a few broad ideas for new, saga movies. The general running theme of this segment will be to buck the current trending ideas, because I think some of them are wholly unnecessary. A Boba Fett movie would be cool because he barely got any screen time, but a Han Solo movie is totally unnecessary. He was in 4 movies. That's enough. That's fine. Just leave it. We don't need a Han Solo oh, god damn it. A Han Solo movie. We don't need it. Most anthology films will probably be prequels, because I think that just works well, because even if they are anthology films, they've still got to tie in some way to the main storyline. Without further ado, let me list to you some of my ideas for Star Wars movies, ranging from things that I really think should happen and out of left field ideas that I personally think would be cool. Fucking General Grievous. That guy deserves his own movie. His backstory is shrouded in mystery, and the dude was a notorious Jedi killer during the Clone Wars. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that much of it in Revenge of the Sith, and in the Clone Wars 3D CGI show, he kind of got neutered. Whereas if you watch the original Clone Wars animated show, the 2D one, he was a badass, taking on 5 Jedi at once. That's the kind of Grievous that I want to see on screen. I want to see how he got from presumably, just an organic person to a cyborg, and his journey down that path, training with Count Dooku, getting all of those lightsabers that we see. That's a cool story to tell. I really would like to see a General Grievous movie. He's one of my favorite characters, and it's partially because he's been so underutilized and kind of pushed to the side. It seems like a missed opportunity not to do that. And yes, I know that this is something that probably won't happen, because for some reason they just don't want to do anything that involves the prequels. But General Grievous was a very good aspect of the prequels. I really liked his character. We all know that the Emperor was a fantastic Machiavellian villain. He was effectively the central antagonist of the entire saga. And I think it would be cool for him to get a great movie based on his origins, in terms of discovering the power of the dark side, leading up to him potentially murdering his own mentor, or possibly not. You can leave that as a nice nod for fans who enjoyed that scene from Revenge of the Sith. It seems strange that we wouldn't get something to do with basically what kicked off one of the central parts of the entire Star Wars saga, which was the re-emergence of the Sith, and then creating the Galactic Empire. I mean, it was the first time that the Sith took control of the galaxy, because even, you know, during the Old Republic stuff, I don't think that they really took control, so to speak. He is the main villain, and I think it would be interesting to learn why he was such a bad person, because in the movies, you just accept him to be, like, basically pure evil, and you can see that, especially considering the performance of Ian McDiarmid. I mean, he nailed it, and yeah, it might be difficult to replace him, because he was perfect, and this is one of the big issues I think that they would face if they tried to make this movie. You gotta cast someone who could play a younger version of Palpatine as well as he did. But at the same time, I think it would be worthwhile to tell that story, because it would be interesting to have a movie that is focused on the dark side, because we really haven't seen that in any of the Star Wars movies. If Disney are planning to focus only on the original trilogy era and past that, it might be a good idea to tell the story of the birth of the rebellion on the big screen to bridge the gap between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. I know that Rebels is kind of that story, but I think it would be better. I think it would be better if there was a film that told that story, because relying on telling pretty important stories in expanded universe stuff that you're doing now isn't necessarily a good idea, because it's not really a side story. It's pretty important to establishing what happened in the very first movie. I know that Rogue One kind of does this, but Rogue One is set very close to the original trilogy. I'm talking about, you know, really in the middle to bridge the gap, to sort of still legitimize the prequel trilogy as, yeah, they're all in the same universe, instead of trying to ignore that they exist. Why not tell the story of the Old Republic on the big screen? Tons of people think this would be a good idea, because, you know, of course it is. One of my big issues with the saga, and this is a very subjective complaint, but it is that all of the central characters belong to the same family tree, which doesn't make much sense in a galaxy. You know, to expand the saga out to the days of the Old Republic, I feel is a good idea, because it was an interesting time period. It was a time when there were dozens of Sith Lords, which we've never seen before on screen. You know, generally, you'll see 1 or 2 per movie, and that's it. As opposed to having, you know, hundreds of Jedi and hundreds of Sith fighting each other. How cool would that be to see on the big screen? That would be awesome. It would also allow the movies to, in more depth, explain sort of the emergence of Jedi and Sith. You know, where they began, how it all arose. I mean, these are things that people who are fans of the series, and in terms of the extended universe and all of that, are familiar with, for sure. And it's a good nod to them, but it also means that you get that information conveyed to the casual fans who aren't that familiar with the origins of the Jedi and the Sith. It might be worthwhile to remind the movie-watching crowd that Darth Maul is still actually alive with his own movie. A lot of people, even the self-proclaimed Star Wars fans who are casual as fuck, don't even know that he's alive. I mean, a lot of people do, for sure. It's, you know, people who've watched the Clone Wars, but some people don't. Making a movie about his journey after the Phantom Menace would remind people that he's still alive. And he was a badass character. I mean, it would be worthwhile to explore his origins. Maybe do a story that kind of spans a longer period of time. Some flashbacks to him training and then sort of getting picked out by Palpatine. His path towards becoming a Sith Lord. And then what happens to him afterwards when he gets so sick bionic legs and hooks up with his brother. Like, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Obi-Wan anthology film. Why is this not even planned yet? Obi-Wan is one of my favorite characters in the Star Wars universe. He really is. I feel like he's played such a pivotal role throughout the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy, played by 2 great actors who played him fantastically. And I just like his character as that mentor figure. You know, the wise, compassionate mentor figure who failed in guiding his original apprentice, but then, you know, he effectively helped bring balance to the Force with Luke Skywalker. I think it would be a terrible shame if we didn't get a story that explained what happened with him between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. I think it's a no-brainer. You know, it doesn't even need to be an action-packed one. This one can be more subdued and melancholy in terms of the story that it tries to tell, with him on Tatooine, keeping guard. Maybe there were a few instances of close calls where stormtroopers nearly discovered that Luke Skywalker was Darth Vader's kid, and then he needs to protect him. That just seems like a cool story idea to me. Fucking Lando Calrissian movie. Let's get that done. That would be awesome. Fucking love Lando Calrissian. And if you feel like it wouldn't work on its own, then this is the one where you can tie Han Solo into it. Han Solo and Lando Calrissian in their, their adventures when they were younger. Hell, even for good measure, throw Admiral Akbar in there. As far as I'm concerned, you can't have too much Admiral Akbar. Now, my last idea will seem way out of left field, but I personally would enjoy it. Battle droid movie, huh? Seriously, I really like the Separatist droids. I think they're quite funny and actually very sympathetic. I often feel bad for them given that they're very obviously sentient, yet mercilessly slaughtered by Jedi. There are so many potential story ideas that you could do for a battle droid movie. I mean, you could do a comedy movie because the battle droids were effectively comic relief. Or you could perhaps tell the story of a group of battle droids during the Clone Wars. Like one of the well-recognized ones that sort of, that lasted a long time and achieved great things. Or, since we know that some battle droids did survive until past the Clone Wars and well beyond that, it would be interesting to perhaps tell the story of a battle droid who managed to survive the Clone Wars and survive while the Empire was around and tell his story. Again, you could pretty much do like a low budget comedy movie with them, or even then, you could still do like a low budget just story with one of these battle droids. I don't know, you could call him Roger. Roger the battle droid. I know people think, man, that's a fucking stupid idea, but no, I would watch that. If they were like, yeah, battle droids coming to cinemas, I would be there day one. I love those battle droids. That about wraps it up for ideas of which most will never see the light of day. I hope other people also like these story ideas. I mean, they're not fully fleshed out. These are more just sort of hypotheticals. Maybe a writer who works with Disney could do something with one of these ideas. And then, you can have story by Fringy in the credits. Some of these ideas are, of course, far out of left field and never going to happen, but I think other ones are interesting things that people would like to see, and stories that are worth telling if you're going to keep making Star Wars anthology films, and if you plan on doing more saga films after Episode 9. I think it would be worthwhile to tell some of these stories, because some of these are ones that people have been requesting. Alright, let's jettison from films to animation on YouTube, a topic that I've been wanting to discuss in some form for a while. When I started Crude Penguin last year, my goal was to release new animations every month, and you all know how that turned out. I think I released 3 animations last year, of which none of them were particularly great in terms of the quality of the animation, and simply due to the fact that I wasn't confident to do, any more than, pretty much 40 seconds of animation. They weren't particularly substantial in terms of writing either. In hindsight, I was fairly naive to think that I'd be able to produce a new animation every month, particularly in conjunction to a weekly webcomic. And keep in mind, I'm a novice animator too. Despite failing to achieve this goal simply due to how much I love animation, and I really do, I've loved it for a long time, because of that, I'd still like to get a few animations done this year. But I'd be lying to you if I told you that in the back of my mind, I wasn't thinking about how difficult it is to be an animator on YouTube. Yeah, we're talking about YouTube again, aren't you thrilled? We've only talked about it 3 or 4 times in this podcast of 8 episodes so far. As a platform, YouTube lends itself well to the kind of content that can be produced rapidly. Vlogs and Let's Plays thrive on YouTube. Not only are they easy to produce on a daily basis, but they're typically quite lengthy as well. YouTube's algorithm looks favorably on these videos because it means that you're watching for a long time, and now that a lot of people are putting in-video ads midway through, or if you're a real asshole, 4 or 5 ads in the middle of your video, making tons of money, and because it means you'll be coming back every day to watch the next one. Animation is on the other end of the spectrum. It takes a long time to make. Even shit animation takes a long time to make. But in the case of really high quality animation, it can take months or even a year for some people. And usually, they aren't very long. Ad revenue for animators is piss poor precisely because the algorithm favors content that isn't like animation, long and can be produced daily. As such, you don't see a lot of animated shows on YouTube. Of course, I don't like the fact that YouTube's algorithm works this way because it favors content that I don't really like. Vlogs aren't particularly high quality content. I mean, let's get that real. It's basically just you walking around with the camera, making minimal edits, and then posting it on YouTube. No scripting, no planning at all, barely any editing. There's not much of a creative process in it. I mean, I fucking hate vlogs because it's just someone walking around recording their life. Isn't that just such a weird attitude to have? My life is so interesting, I'm gonna start a vlog channel so that I can share what I do in my life with people who'd want to watch that. You really want to be sat there watching someone? Yeah, so I'm wearing my big sunglasses because even though it's fucking cloudy, and I'm going to the shops, or the mall as you like to call it, my trans-Pacific cousins. Yeah, we're going to the mall, and isn't this just a fabulous dress? That's my Cali from the Valley accent. It's not very good, but it's partially because of my deep monotone. I'm much better at doing American accents than Americans are at doing Australian ones. Believe me, I don't think I've ever seen an American do a good Australian accent. I'm getting off topic. Basically, what I'm trying to say is, even though vlogs fucking suck in my opinion, that's the kind of stuff that thrives on YouTube because the algorithm favors it. As a result, you don't really see a lot of channels that are dedicated to animation, and of the channels that are, very few of them are able to post animation regularly. Cyanide and Happiness is basically the only regular cartoon on YouTube, and even that show only exists thanks to the support that it got on Kickstarter. Greatest Warriors is certainly TV quality, but that show struggled as well due to a lack of revenue. In the case of these YouTube-based animation teams like Channel Frederator and Explosion, we've seen shows becoming premium because they just frankly are not profitable when released on YouTube. For some reason, people get mad at this, which makes no sense to me. I tend to have a lot of sympathy towards animation on YouTube because, especially when they have to charge for that content, but some fans don't seem to appreciate the cost and effort of animation and how it simply is not sustainable on YouTube without monetary support from fans. Unless the animations are getting 10 million views every time, when you've got an animation team of multiple people working on a TV quality animated show, it's a pipe dream. It's just not going to happen on YouTube as it is right now. Of course, it may be a good idea to actually release your cartoon on a service that's available internationally as opposed to only in the US. Yeah, that would be a good idea to try and avoid that. The way I see it though, when it comes to animation on YouTube, I think viewers need to realize that for it to be on here regularly and produced independent and released for free, someone's got to pay for it. Somebody has to front that cost. Now, from my point of view, I'd much rather have content fan-funded and released for free instead of studio-funded and locked behind a subpar service. But thankfully, you do see a lot of this support from people. When it comes to, people setting up Patreons for some things, it doesn't really work out as well because I think people can realize that it's kind of low-quality, low-effort content. But when it comes to, for example, a lot of artists and animators, they thankfully do tend to get a pretty good amount of support on services like Patreon. I'm not sure if it's full-time for them or if they still need to do, freelance work or whatever, but it's good to see that some animated properties and cartoons and comics and stuff have been sustained thanks to fans who are passionate for what the person is making and really want to help support them do it. This creates a very interesting paradigm in terms of the viewer-creator relationship where you've got viewers of their own accord, not necessarily getting a direct monetary value out of it, supporting people who are creating content and making it come to be. It's cool to see creator and viewer kind of having a closer relationship in terms of content, because there is a very clear divide when it comes to, film and television. I'd like to think that YouTube are working on ways to actually help animators out. Maybe it would be a good idea to find ways to sort of boost that ad revenue for people who've made high quality content. And of course that would be kind of difficult because it means you gotta have somebody manning looking for animation, and you couldn't have it be a thing where someone could just say, yeah, my thing's an animation, but it's actually not, and just making a whole bunch of money because of that system. I think it would be cool if YouTube did try in some way to design the algorithm so that it doesn't just purely favor long daily uploads, but favored content that gets a lot of likes because it's actually good, or that has 100% retention time because it's 1 minute, so that only counts for 1 minute watch time, but it was one very good minute, and hence someone stayed for the whole duration. These are the kind of things that would probably help animators out. But alas, YouTube doesn't listen to us, so that's probably never gonna happen. So yeah, you'll be real happy with YouTube when animators have to just start saying, "Nope, sorry, can't do it anymore." You can thank YouTube for that one. It's time for Q&A. Hooray! Remember, if you want to leave a question, feel free to leave it in the comments section, and then I'll get around to it in the next episode. Dan Ramirez asks, what is your prediction on what will happen when Steam and Origin begin charging for online? Pretty simple answer, they won't. You probably knew that, but I'm just saying right now, that's never gonna happen. If Steam were to implement a paid service, it would probably be an optional subscription along the lines of PlayStation Plus on the PS3 and Vita. But in terms of paying for online multiplayer on PC, that's not gonna happen. The reason why Steam would never charge for online is very much tied to my answer to this question. To answer this question, let's go back in time. We're like Marty McFly on the Cynical Den Podcast. When Microsoft implemented games for Windows Live years back, it fucking failed. It totally fucking failed. And while it was partially due to the piss poor infrastructure, a significant factor was the fact that the service was premium. You had to pay to play online. This was implemented after Microsoft had gotten away with charging people for Xbox Live, despite the fact that it should have been a free service, for years, because Xbox gamers were easily taken advantage of when it comes to getting swindled. But they thought they could do the same thing to PC gamers, and they couldn't, because PC gamers aren't that easily taken advantage of. That still holds true, though, to a somewhat lesser degree than back then. The whole loot crate thing in CSGO is kind of evidence of that. You know, PC gamers have gotten a little bit worse when it comes to that. The fact that you got tons of people buying stupid skins on CSGO, despite the fact that they offer no value, just shows that not all PC gamers are that responsible about their interests as a consumer and what they do with their money. That said, you can even look at the fact that subscription-based MMOs aren't very prominent anymore to just see that PC gamers aren't that willing to spend money on an online service. The Elder Scrolls Online and Star Wars The Old Republic struggled as a result of their costs. The fact that there were other MMOs on the market that were free, and yet these games cost money, did hurt them. And eventually, they did go free to play to some extent, though they still had a membership, but again, it was optional. We also see that PC gamers aren't typically thrilled when a game doesn't work and will be quick to voice their concerns on Steam through the review system. The pressure PC gamers put on Valve prompted them to even implement a return service for their digital games. It's this kind of pressure that the PC gaming community puts on companies that has helped them in the long run. The fact that they're not willing to just settle for subpar services or getting swindled of their money. And while Steam is certainly not a perfect service, it still has problems that PC gamers need to be willing to admit. There are problems, especially with the early access shit that's littering Steam. Some of the issues with the curator system. It does have problems that PC gamers need to be more aware of. But by and large, PC gamers are fairly attentive when it comes to these issues. When you take into account all of these factors, if Steam were to charge for online, people would just boycott Steam to the point that they'd probably lose money. If they did it, I certainly would be making a big deal about it. And I wouldn't be the only one. You'd have guys like Total Biscuit making a huge deal about it, and that would gain a lot of traction. I just don't think it would get that far if they tried to do it. And in terms of Origin, that would probably kill the service outright. I mean, Steam has a little bit more leverage because there are thousands of games on Steam, but with Origin, really, most of us are only playing for Battlefield, some of us for Titanfall, like me. If they did that, people would just stop using the service. So they would never do it. I mean, Steam might try, but again, I just don't think they would because they know that there would be a massive consumer revolt against them if they did that. That about does it for this episode of the Cynical Den Podcast. Thanks a lot for joining me today. If you enjoyed this episode and you want to see more from Crude Penguin, feel free to hit up crudepenguin.com, follow it on Twitter and Facebook, take a look at the comics. Hopefully there'll be some new content very soon that I've been working hard on getting out. I've been saying this for the last few episodes, but I think there should be some things. I'm debating about starting a smaller project that can get off the ground very quickly, that I think has potential and that I have briefly alluded to last year while I was working on it. but maybe you'll hear more about that next week. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Cynical Den Podcast.